welcome back to the Checkered Flag. I am co-host Drew, joined here by Nate, where we'll be talking today about the off-season. We're getting into a fresh start with the Daytona 500 coming up next week. So we'll be talking a little bit about the off-season news with all the stuff that happened in the couple of months that we've had since the last race in Phoenix, as well as a couple of other things, including like schedule highlights, the driver news of different swap seats and other signings, as well as just a couple of picks that we're going to talk about with like the chase, the races, all coming up in that. So, Nate, I know that for the off season, we definitely had a lot of different motion going on right now. Had some good stuff, some tragic stuff, and some things that were not necessarily the best move by NASCAR, but it happened. So, to kind of dive in a little bit, this is 2026. It has been the 25 years since the passing of Dale Sr. The significant impact that he left on the sport was something that, every NASCAR fan, whether, they've got into it a couple years ago or if they were into it back in the 80s, they know who Dale Earnhardt Sr. is. Just with the legacy impact that he left, 25 years, it feels like it hasn't even been that long. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, you can't really replace somebody like Dale Sr. And the impact that somebody like him had on the sport. There are some drivers, that have had impacts since his passing, but realistically, he's like the Michael Jordan of NASCAR. He's the guy that, put NASCAR on the map and really elevated the sport to that next level. And yeah, it's super sad. I know I'm a big Dale Earnhardt guy, and it's obviously 25 years, but the way that he's impacted the sport up until this point, and as far as just bringing fans around to the sport and globalizing it and everything, it's amazing. Another like tragic thing that happened this off season, like we were talking about, we just wanted to give some condolences right off the bat to the Greg Biffle family. Obviously, Denny Hamlin and his family, that all the stuff that they're going through, and Michael Annette's family as well. Just give condolences to those guys. Obviously, it really impacted the community in a serious way this off season. We just want to give condolences to those guys and hope the best for their families and everything in the future.
Yeah, man. Michael Annett was the first down the list, and for people that don't watch NASCAR and are into it as much as most people are in past times, Michael Annett was a Cup Series driver who drove for Tommy Baldwin Racing in the mid 2010s when the Gen 6 car was first coming out. Those years he was running like Rick Ware equipment. It was not the greatest finishes, but he did have flashes, and he wanted to take that opportunity to go over to Junior Motorsports, where he ran a couple of years and got a single career win over at Daytona. So Michael Annett, rest in peace. The NASCAR world misses you, and we won't forget you. Greg Biffle, that one was a stake in my heart. I grew up with Greg Biffle in the sport. Like, he was winning races, contender for the championship, like someone that I was a traditional Hendricks Chevy guy, but he was someone that I've always rooted for just because of his personality and how he is on the track. He's a clean driver. He's left a lasting impact on many people in the NASCAR community. And one person I want to point that out to is Cletus McFarland. They were really good friends for a long time. And, Biff was doing a lot with Cletus in terms of raising money and supporting different charities. So I'm sure Cletus has been feeling it these last couple of weeks. I know it's been a little bit since the passing, but it's hard to get over something like that when you have such a close relationship with them. So I'm curious to see what Cletus is going to be looking forward to this year, because I know he's attempting to make the Daytona race, and he may have other races on the schedule, but maybe you can shed some light on that.
Yeah, for sure. I know right off the bat, um, Cletus is obviously going to be attributing a lot to like of this season that he's going to be racing to Greg Biffle. He said it in a lot of his YouTube videos, and everything that he's been posting has been "Be Like Biff" with that number 16 logo. And just speaking on that too. NASCAR's done a really good job, I think, of really incorporating it, and not really, just letting something that tragic just kind of go to waste or go by the wayside, I guess. They brought a lot of attention to it, which I appreciate. As just a fan of the sport, and as somebody was just getting into it and just getting to know the Biff, through the Cletus videos and everything. What he did off the track too. With those with like the helicopter rescues and stuff in North Carolina when they were going through the hurricanes. I really think that the whole "Be Like Biff" motto or mantra is a great thing to be putting out there for everybody to see.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, I really like that. Obviously, Cletus is talking about racing in the Truck Series this upcoming Daytona race. He's still running ARCA, so that'll be cool to see. And he's gonna try to run alongside Travis Pastrana in the Truck Series, which that could be a lot of fun. I know those two guys are pretty electric off the track as far as just personality wise, and it'll be cool to see, what they might be able to get into. Because I know Travis Pastrana, he finished 11th in the Daytona 500 last time he raced there, um, in the Cup Series. So it'll be interesting to see what they're able to do with Nice Motorsports
Hmm.
when when they're racing that truck race. If Cletus can obviously qualify.
For sure. And I know Travis Pastrana had a brief stint in NASCAR in the mid 2010s as well. So, I recognize the name from NASCAR specifically. I didn't watch what he did previously, but in the stint that he had in the 60 car, it wasn't really the greatest showing that we've seen from other racers going into our sport. I mean, you can kind of tell with like Shane Van Gisbergen, who's, driven in New Zealand and Australia his whole career, coming in, winning road course races, whereas you have a guy like Travis Pastrana fresh into the nationwide series when it was called, wrecking a lot, having a lot of DNFs, not getting the best finishes. So I'm curious to see how the performance is going to go for him, if he's going to get some redemption. And, you talked about the Daytona 500 finish he had last time. That race was a little bit hectic just with all the big ones and the crashes that happened. I mean, that's why Jimmy Johnson got third at the 500 last year. I mean, he was racing good, but, I think a lot of it has to do with a little bit of luck. So we'll kind of have to see what goes on with there. But, another truck series entry that I am definitely looking forward to is Colleague and Ram. With the fourth manufacturer coming back into NASCAR, it's something every NASCAR fan is super excited and hopeful for, because I'm sure a lot of people were fans of Dodges growing up with the whole, RFK, or excuse me, Roush Fenway at the time. You had Penske that were running Dodges, and Tony Stewart's going to be running for Ram. So I know a lot of those older NASCAR folks, that were fan of Tony Stewart growing up and watching the sport, are definitely looking forward to that weekend.
Yeah, no, for sure. I really like the fact that Tony is coming back. I know there was some a little bit of beef in the past with between him and NASCAR, so I think it's cool that he's kind of putting the beef aside to bring back and like really ignite this comeback with Ram, um, and be able to really just you know I don't know. It's just cool to see more than three manufacturers in the sport, right? I mean, there's talks about Honda coming back and everything else. I mean, obviously Dodge potentially coming back to the Cup Series and Xfinity. Um, but I think this cool thing that NASCAR is trying to do with bringing Ram back. I don't know if you've seen online on the YouTube channels and stuff that this like the driver challenge that the colleague racing team is doing with all these young drivers
Mm.
to fill that last seat. I was watching a little bit of that today, and I really thought that's a cool concept, a cool idea to like get new fans into enjoying the sport and like seeing it from a an actual competition standpoint on just one team as to like what it really takes. The pedigree of these drivers that they have, they're all champions in their own respective divisions. They're their own champions and, whether it's late models or, whatever they could be racing, they're all good drivers. And it really just shows what it takes to become a NASCAR driver because of the fact that, these guys have won races outside of NASCAR, but they're all having to compete and work their asses off to be able to get to where they need to be to actually just make it to the cup or to the truck series, let alone the cup series, which is a totally different ball game.
Yeah, and I know with these challenges, I know for those that play NASCAR 25 in the career mode, one of the first races that you do in that career mode is you go to Rockingham and you do a race to see if you're eligible for a full-time ride in ARCA. So we have so many different types of smaller challenges and different organizations that prospect young talented drivers. So super excited about that program. It's definitely something to look forward to, and maybe some teams can implement that down the road. And I know with like a driver like Corey Day, who raced part-time for both the Xfinity and the Truck Series, he was a Hendrick developmental driver, and they have a couple of those in their program that they're kind of just waiting on to see if they're a fit within the organization and if they have the talent to have that ride. But speaking of Xfinity, This is the first time since I can't remember mid 2010s that, they're deciding to move on from Xfinity into a new partner with O'Reilly's Auto Parts. And I know in the past, older NASCAR folks, they still call it the Busch Series. We moved on to the Nationwide Series, about 15 years ago, moved over to
Mhm.
Xfinity, and now we're at O'Reilly's Auto Parts. And, just to kind of highlight Xfinity, super, super important company within the organization. They, gave us a lot of money and sponsorships to help promote the Xfinity series at the time. They had a ton of commercials and, directly affiliated with NASCAR that kind of, push the sport forward. So, big thank you to Xfinity for what they provided for NASCAR for the years that they had a sponsor. They're not going away entirely, but they're just taking a step back, and I think that's good for them because it's a lot when you're a sponsor of an entire series surrounded by hundreds of crew members, drivers, all of that stuff. So, definitely excited for O'Reilly's to step on board and become that partnership that we've been always having in the O'Reilly series now that we're going to call it effective January 5th this year. Now everything is going to be called the O'Reilly series, which I know some people are going to get a little confused. They're like Xfinity, Nationwide, Busch, it doesn't really matter what you call it from a NASCAR fan standpoint, but proper term is the O'Reilly series. So super excited about that partnership.
Yeah, no, it should be a really good, move going forward with O'Reilly being a partner. Obviously, like you said, Xfinity, great thing what they've done with the sport. I know they are a big partner in like Dale Jr.'s podcast and everything too. So obviously, still staying in the sport somewhat, but um, makes sense why they had to take a step back just after so many years of continued support. And it is cool to see, like a auto parts store that everybody can go to, just being the sponsor of the series. Um, Also,
Yeah, I think
speaking of go ahead.
no, I'm just saying, like, the proper like name for it is the O'Reilly's Auto Parts series. Like
Yeah,
in the past, we've had simple slogans: Bush series, Nationwide series, Xfinity series. Now we have to call it the O'Reilly's Auto Parts series. So that's one
yeah,
thing I am a little bit not disappointed, but not necessarily, but just more not really into it. Just the fact that it has a super long name. And that was the same situation with the Cup Series. They had it for a couple of years as the Monster Energy NASCAR Cup Series. Like that was a mouthful that no one wanted to pronounce. They just called it the Cup Series. So,
yeah,
in the past, you had the Winston Cup Series. Winston was a longtime partner with NASCAR. And then we moved on to the Nextel Series, then the Sprint Cup Series, then the Monster Energy NASCAR Cup Series. So, over on the Cup side, now it's literally just called Cup Series. And I think that that's a really good just notion for that aspect, just because they're able to promote companies like Bush, like Coca-Cola, like O'Reilly's as well. Those guys are all, stakeholders in the name for the Cup Series, but they're not a single company is, per se sponsoring the NASCAR Cup Series. It's more of just everyone's getting a little bit of bread in the basket, where each company is, they're a primary sponsor of the sport, but they're not getting the recognition. It's just called the Cup Series. And I think that it's good for our top series, but for the lower series, like we had the Camping World Truck Series, now it's back to the Craftsman Truck Series. I think that's great. I think it's catchy. Same thing with O'Reilly's. If it was called the O'Reilly's Series, it doesn't really make sense. Like the O'Reilly's Auto Parts Series, that makes more sense. But looking forward, I think that this partnership's going to go a long way, and I'm super excited to see where it goes. But did cut you off. I do apologize. So what were you wanting to say?
Oh, no, nothing, not nothing crazy, obviously. I mean, like, even just what you're saying too, like, with the color changes of everything too, I think it's gonna be cool that the Truck Series has its nice red color with the Craftsman Truck Series, and that this lime green is gonna be kind of the new color of the O'Reilly Auto Parts series, as you were talking about. Um, Obviously, like, the Cup Series is not made sponsored by anybody currently, but, it's definitely cool to see the different moves that NASCAR's made. And I mean, some other moves that we've made. A major move that we would want to talk about that happened this offseason was the moving away from the playoff format into the remade chase format. Um, so I mean, I don't know about you. I don't know if I necessarily I like it better than the playoff format for sure. I definitely think that it kind of takes away from that last race at Phoenix being the end all be all of what happens in the entire playoffs. And it's cool to see that, the drivers are rewarded for what happens to them throughout the entire season because I think longevity is a big thing in NASCAR to where, there's drivers that start off hot almost every year. I mean, you look at William Byron or Christopher Bell last year who started off, on fire. And obviously William Byron made it to the final four last year, but I mean, he really started to fade out over the season. I mean, Christopher Bell, I mean, at times he was finishing way, way far back in the pack, towards the end of the season. And I think that with this new format and not having necessarily the win and you're in situations, I think that it really is going to expand, and show who is actually the best driver. And the best driver is going to be who takes home the championship of that entire season.
Yeah, no, and I'm gonna try my best to remain like Switzerland and impartial to this change, just because both formats have their pros and cons. Like for the playoffs, like winning was important and winning was rewarded. So with the playoff format, I did really appreciate the fact that, consistency was rewarded in that aspect because those that, did well in the regular season, like Kyle Larson had like 15 stage wins in the first 12 races of the season. Like he had all those playoff points ready to go for the round of 16, round of 12, round of 8. So the playoff format rewarded consistency. It was unfair to those that had a bad round of 12, had 3 bad races and were just knocked out. Whereas, now that we have the chase format, it's going to reward consistency throughout the regular season, but also it's going to reward consistency during that 10 race stretch. And one thing that I do really like about this chase format is now that they're rewarding more points for wins. That was something that wasn't really needed in the playoff format because win and you're in was just, if as long as you won a race, you were good. But now that we have this chase format, you're now getting 55 points instead of 40. And I think that that's going to go a long way for those like Christopher Bell, Shane Van Gisbergen, Kyle Larson, all those guys that had multiple wins in the year. Those guys are going to be the ones that you're going to see more towards the top. The chase, here's the thing. I grew up around the chase. That was the first format that I grew up on. Like, I was so sick of Jimmy Johnson winning year over year. I'm sure a lot of people were upset about that. But, with this chase format, we may have a champion decided at Talladega or even at Martinsville. Like, that's one thing that is a little bit, not gonna say bad, but it's something that, fans that are going to Miami later this year, like they already know who the champion is. Like they're just there going for the race. They're highlighting it as like the big O championship weekend. But, when you have a guy that has a consistent first 9 races of the season or of the chase and, completely rails everyone else, like, it's not gonna be fun to watch, especially if there's a guy just riding around the track doing absolutely nothing and just hoping that he wins the championship, which is that's one thing why, the chase can be good, but it can be bad. It's just it rewards consistency, but through that 36 race stretch, if you don't have more than one person that's competitive in that 10 race stretch, then the winner is going to be decided like within the first couple of weeks based on wins, consistency, top fives and top tens. So we'll just have to see what's going to happen down the road, but that's one thing to keep an eye out on is just who's having a standout performance in the regular season, who's having a standout performance in the chase. Because when you go back to the 2006 to 2010, that 5-5 with Jimmy Johnson, one thing that him and Chad Knaus did exceptionally well was they were content with running top 10, top 15 throughout the entire season. All of their bread and butter was in the chase, where they would make sure their cars were content enough to, race semi-decent finishes. That way they can qualify into the chase, but their main focus was on those last 10 races. So they would experiment a lot at tracks with multiple races on the schedule, like Kansas, like Phoenix, like Talladega. So when that 10-race stretch came, their cars were set. They were leveling the field. That's why they were so consistent and so good. So it's going to be I'm going to be really curious to see what kind of teams are going to be doing stuff like that. And one person I do want to highlight is going to be Kyle Larson, because you'll notice how Kyle Larson will go out and dominate a race, let's say like Bristol, Kansas, then they go to the fall weekend and he's not that good. So it's more of, are they going to be experimenting in the spring And are they going to use that information to take it into the fall? And especially with this new body, we don't know all of that information yet. Like, we don't know how the aerodynamics of that car are going to work, or how bump drafting is going to work, or how the nose, if they get in the wall or if they get in the back of a car, how that's going to affect everything in terms of the engine and the car like that. So, really curious to see how Chevy kind of reacts going into this year with a new body, as well as, seeing what teams and what drivers are kind of, just testing stuff and not running the best that they usually are normally running at these racetracks.
Yeah, I mean, just with that Gen 7 car, I mean, that or the no, sorry, this is the Gen 7 car. But with the Chevy
Sorry.
with the Chevy remake of the Gen 7 car, I guess, they're kind of the latest, responder to, having a remake. I know Toyota had one, I think it was last year, and then Ford had theirs first. Um, but with Chevy being the last manufacturer to actually have a remake to this Gen 7 car, I think in a way it helps them, uh, because they didn't necessarily jump the gun and they're not like, okay, we need to make something new and put it out there right now. Uh, Not necessarily that Toyota or Ford did those things, but I think it's cool that, not only did Chevy just have a champion last year, but they're like, okay, we're going to make ourselves better. We're going to try to, be more aerodynamic. And I don't know about you, but I definitely saw the difference. Not when they first released it, I couldn't really tell the difference. It didn't look a whole lot different than the original Chevy car that was out there. But when I watched the clash at Bowman Gray, you could really see the difference in the nose. It does look a lot more round. And I'm hoping that, obviously being a Chevy guy myself, that the bow ties are going to be able to, you know, get off to a strong start in the season. Um, I know Bowman Gray is such a small sample size, but I mean, just from that race alone, we saw Chevy's kind of leading the pack for quite a bit of that race. I mean, Hocevar was up there, Larson, Byron, even Daniel Suarez was up there. I mean, the Spire guys were it was kind of a hectic race all over, so it's hard to judge it. But I mean, SVG is another one, all these Chevy guys that were able to actually lead laps with this new car. I thought that was kind of cool that it wasn't like they were just barely rounding out the top 10 or whatever. There was a significant amount of Chevrolets in that top 10. It was cool to see that throughout the entirety of that race. Um, and so I think while we may have seen like with the Fords and the Toyotas, it took them a little bit of time to really tune that car in and get it to where they need it to be. That I think the Chevys, because they waited so long, are actually going to have a good opportunity to hit the ground running and really push this car to its maximum very early on, and they aren't going to have to catch up. Um,
Yeah,
so yeah, I mean,
and I know
go
with
ahead.
the off season, I mean, they had 2.5 months to test this new nose over this course. I know with Chevrolet not producing any Camaros anymore, they're switching over to the nose of the ZL1. So that's going to be the car that they're going to base off their bodies on. So I'm curious to see what Chevrolet does as a organization and a manufacturer, seeing what they're doing with their cars, moving down the road, because a lot of the inspiration of the cars that we have in NASCAR are inspired by models that they produce to the general public. So it's gonna be really curious. But I think that you're a little bit right on that. I know Toyota had some new changes in the off season going into the 2025 year, and we all thought that they were going to go off on a slow start. And then Christopher Bell comes out of nowhere, wins Atlanta, wins Coda, then wins all of those races in a row, where it's like, Chevrolet looked great during the clash. Like, don't get me wrong, like a Ford still won the race, but Chevrolet was up front in contention the entire time. But, you had guys like SVG who, obviously still learning on ovals. He was leading laps. You had Connor Zilic, who, was on a part-time schedule last year, rookie into this year. He was up front in the top 5 at certain points. Hocevar was leading. Like, it wasn't just the powerhouse of Hendricks that was in front, leading laps. You had multiple different organizations from Chevrolet that were in contention for the win. Speaking of new changes to the offseason, with the new driver changes, with Daniel Suarez going away from Trackhouse over to Spire to drive the number 7. Justin Haley's out of a ride. Go figure. I figured that was going to happen eventually. He wasn't getting the numbers that we thought he could get, especially with how dominant he was at restrictor plate tracks. We thought he'd be the next coming of Ricky Stenhouse Jr., but that didn't really happen. So, with SVG moving over back to the 97, Connor Zilic coming in as a rookie with the 88, and Daniel Suarez coming in as a 2007, all Chevrolet drivers. So, Ford, Toyota, they stayed the same. So, they're not really having to worry about, driver changes and stuff like that. But, with this new acquisition of Connor Zilic to Trackhouse and Daniel Suarez to Spire, I'm curious to see if they Spire maybe made the right decision, if Trackhouse made the wrong decision or right decision, because it's all going to depend on how well Zilic does. But don't get me wrong, he's 19 years old, he's young. He's going to be here for a while, so I have no doubts that, Zilic is going to be here long term. But I'm curious to see how they perform, starting off with new teams, new crew chief, new crew members. So we'll have to see what happens at Daytona. But, looking at the Clash, they were running top 5 during the race. So, got some highlights there. I mean, it's not a points paying race. It's nothing serious, but it was good to see them start off on a hot streak to start off the year, making it into the Clash and qualifying in a decent position and starting top 5.
Yeah. No, I kind of going off of what you said there with not really seeing who might be the best outcome of the situation with the with Zilic coming into Trackhouse and Suarez going over to Spire. I honestly, personally think that this could be a situation where it really is the best. Like, it's a win-win situation. It's kind of like a Matt Stafford, Jared Goff kind of trade in the NFL, to where both teams kind of got a win out of it. They got somebody who wants to drive for them, and they've got somebody that is going to be successful for both teams. Um, I personally really liked Daniel Suarez in the Clash. Obviously, it's like we said, a small sample size, and you can't really take too much away from it. Um, but he is aggressive. I mean, he was being very aggressive, and you could tell he's got a chip on his shoulder this season. He got let go by Trackhouse. There's this new kid on the block that they're like, oh, we're gonna take the hot new item, and we're getting rid of this guy so that way we can open a seat for Zilic. And I really do think that like him and Hocevar can work very well together. Having that experienced driver and Suarez, really pushing on a young driver too, like Hocevar. I don't know. I was listening to some post race interviews after the Clash, and like we were saying, we could take it with a grain of salt. But I mean, Hocevar was one of the guys at the end of the race who was talking about, you know everybody showed up and they were ready to race. It's not like they didn't take this race seriously. I mean, we saw past clashes at Daytona where it's single file racing, and it just kind of seems people are there just to be there, just to run their cars around the track and get a finish at the end of the day. Whereas, we saw people spinning each other out. We saw people putting each other into the wall. It seemed like an actual race, which I thought was kind of fun to watch. It was entertaining. I mean, granted, the whole weather situation, the race being postponed, everything that came along with it, it kind of sucked, that portion of it. But it was good to see that it was good racing. It was hard racing. It wasn't just, let's just get in a single file line and run around in a circle. So I do think that we got a decent sample size as to what we might be able to see. And if Suarez is able to keep it up, and if Zilic is able to learn quickly on these ovals and perform well, I mean, we could be seeing a win-win for both teams.
Yeah, and speaking of the Clash, I mean, we saw what happened. I mean, postponed to Wednesday due to the snow. I mean, we had a terrible cold front, and it was below freezing down here in Florida for a couple of days. Like, it was chilly everywhere. And the first time we've ever had a race on Wednesday was, or not first time, but last time we had a race on Wednesday was COVID time, and obviously that schedule was kind of wacky tobacky. But looking at right now for the Clash, with it being Wednesday, I mean, I don't want a situation like that again next year. I mean, you had the rain, you had the delay during the race. The track was wet. People were constantly spinning out. They wouldn't throw a caution where they run a couple of laps. They would they'd stop the tracking of the laps, and they would just get them back going. And we had to sit there for an hour and a half watching Kyle Larson run out of gas, watching Austin Dillon spin out. All that stuff. Like, that's not something NASCAR fans like to watch. I mean, it was a 4-hour event for a 200-lap race that would have taken an hour at most, hour and a half at most, and it was a brutal watch. From a NASCAR fan perspective, the racing was great, but having it stop and start again, start again, it was kind of a pain to watch, especially when throw a caution, commercials, run a couple of laps, commercial. That's something that NASCAR fans are tired of seeing, over the course of the years, especially with the commercials. It's been pretty brutal on Fox broadcasts and NBC. So, looking back at the clash, I'm hoping that, everything is going to change a little bit. And oh my goodness, holy 2 frames per second, Nate. What is going on your end, man? It looks like I'm looking at some creepy pasta on Reddit right now, like some like quality image. What is going on your end?
I have no
All right, you're
idea.
back. All right, welcome back.
Am I back? Okay, cool.
Yeah, I think we're so back. All right. Anyways, um talking about pissed off drivers, I mean, one person I'm primarily looking at for next year is Dennis Hamlin. Um with Phoenix championship weekend, I mean, that was a stab in the heart. It was a shank, it was a knife to the hip. That was terrible. And I don't blame that on Denny at all. It's all Chris Gabehart and, taking 4 tires instead of 2. That whole situation happened. Like, that was a championship Denny Hamlin should have had. And then, of course, we go into the off season, the rest in peace to, Hamlin's father, and, hoping the recovery goes well for Denny's mother. But Denny looks pissed off right now. I mean, he has more wrinkles on his face. It looks like he's been grieving a lot, and, doesn't look like he's fully locked in. But he looks like he's angry. He looks like he is wanting to just kill everyone and be the best driver he can be. Like, that's a shade of Dale Earnhardt. Like, I'm thinking that we may see something like that out of Denny Hamlin this year. I think he's done, getting bossed around. I think he's done, just being, he had 6 wins last year, but it wasn't enough. And, he was definitely the championship favorite at the time. So, I think going into 2026, depending on how Denny Hamlin performs, we may see him, either on his way out to retirement, or we may see a championship for the first time in his career. And I'm definitely looking forward to it, because I remember watching the clash. There was a couple of situations where Denny wasn't giving anyone slack. Like, he didn't care. He got into a couple of incidents that weren't his fault, and he got into some that were. So, with him being a vet of the sport, something good to see in terms of, having flashes of Dale Sr. coming back after, the 25th year anniversary. So definitely something to look forward to for next year. And I'm excited to see what Denny Hamlin will do.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with you and you with everything you said about Denny. Um, but I mean, the thing that I really think is going to happen with him this year is, there is a lot that went on with him in the offseason. Obviously, that heartbreaking loss at Phoenix, and even more of a heartbreak with what happened with his father and his mother in that house fire and everything. Um, I think realistically, though, I've read things about Denny and listened to some of his interviews and things, and he said, I mean, the thing that's going to get his mind off of that kind of stuff this year is just going to be racing. That's going to be his happy place. That's going to be his way of, coming back and like really finding where he needs to be. And maybe that was what's going to get him going. I think it's going to be what really helps propel him forward to getting where he needs to be and where he wants to be, really realistically. I mean, he's been in this he's one of the oldest drivers in the Cup Series right now. Um, and he's one of the most, or like one of the winningest drivers in the Cup Series to not have a championship under his belt too. So I think that would be one thing that's just going to push him forward to be the best version of himself that he can be. I mean, speaking of Denny and JGR and 2311, all those guys. I mean, more 2311 than anything, but that lawsuit that happened in the off season. Um, it's crazy. I mean, it's fun, kind of from a fan perspective. You get to see the drama of NASCAR and those kinds of things. I don't know. Did you want to talk a little bit to the lawsuit as far as like just what you've seen? Like, what are the differences we might see this season um, from the outcomes of that?
Yeah, I mean, it's important to remain impartial because it was a win-win situation. I mean, this could have gone on for months, maybe even years, and I'm super grateful that NASCAR decided to be like, "Hey, we're not in the most perfect spot in terms of relationships with teams, team owners, and all that stuff." So I think it was fair for them to kind of just agree on something down the road rather than have this stretch on over the course of a couple of months. But I can't really talk much about it just because I work at NASCAR and NDAs and stuff like that. I'm not sure what I'm supposed to disclose and what I'm not supposed to. But with the charter agreement and all that stuff, now all the teams that have full-time cars are permanent charters. So now every car that I can't remember if it's 36 or 37 cars, they all have 36 races where they don't have to worry about qualifying in. They have a set spot. All that really matters now is how well they perform during qualifying to really start the race. But, if they crash during qualifying, it's not like they're going to get knocked out. They have a full-time spot secured. So I know in the past when we're looking at the Chicago Street Race back in 25, Corey Heim got on the wall during qualifying, and Catherine Legge ended up beating him out, and Corey Heim didn't qualify into the race. And that was something we were worried about with like Front Row Motorsports, 2311. Like if there were more than 40 cars qualifying and one of them wrecked out, like they wouldn't have been able to go into the race. And that was something that was super. I mean, NASCAR fans completely disagreed on that topic. So I think it's a very positive outcome for both teams and NASCAR. The fact that every driver now has a secured spot going into each race. And I know with, other with that charter agreement and all the lawsuits being settled, NASCAR, wanted to step back from the drama because they're starting to lose sponsorships. I mean, it just got announced the other day that McDonald's was leaving NASCAR after 33 years of being a sponsor in the organization. They're going to be moving towards I think it was the McLaren or the Red Bull team over in Formula One. So that could be something down the road that's suspicious and could be scary, especially having all these longtime partners that have been around NASCAR that are leaving the sport. Like we talked about FedEx last year that left NASCAR after being part of Brian Vickers and Denny Hamlin and Bobby Labonte for so long. So, with the outcome of this lawsuit, I think McDonald's just didn't want to be a part of the drama anymore. And McDonald's was a sponsor of Bubba Wallace, who was on 2311, which was the entirety of what was surrounding the whole lawsuit. So, that's something that we should be looking at down the road is if we have another situation like that, are sponsors going to want to continue supporting us? Are we making the right decisions? And what's going to go down the road? Like, I know we have a lot of smaller sponsors on teams and organizations, but for like the big Fortune 500 companies like Anheuser-Busch and Xfinity and Coca-Cola and all of those organizations, like how are they going to react and respond to the move that McDonald's just made?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely something that's, it's going to be interesting to see. I don't necessarily know what's going to happen from here. Obviously, I'm like and just so the viewers know, like I am a newer fan to NASCAR. So it's hard for me not having necessarily as big of great of a perspective on it as you do. But obviously, I mean, any time that a sponsor as large as McDonald's or FedEx is leaving the Cup Series, it's a big story to talk about, right? Like that's a lot of money that's leaving. That's a big organization that's heading out. Um, but hopefully, I mean, looking at it positively, it opens up the door for some other big companies to make their way into the Cup Series. I mean, some newer sponsors like Prime, obviously, like with them having broadcasts and stuff like that. Another huge company, right? That's a big win for NASCAR getting those guys in there. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see what other big companies might come in as the sport continues to grow. And obviously, we know that you know sponsors leaving the sport isn't anything that's new necessarily, and they can always come back at the end of the day too. It's not like
Hmm.
they're gone forever. Uh, Go
Yeah,
ahead.
and speaking of big organizations, how about that San Diego race on the 2026 schedule, sponsored by Anduril? I don't know exactly what Anduril is. I Where I work at a NASCAR, I talk to people all the time on the phone, and I've talked to multiple people within the Anduril organizations. They have engineers, technicians, so I think it's like military based organization, but that's a really cool partnership to have at NASCAR, especially with how closely tied we are to military and veterans. We have that, iconic Memorial Day weekend honoring, vets and all that stuff. And of course, with the flyover, during the national anthem over each race, it's super exciting to see a company like Anduril be a part of NASCAR. But what's even more exciting is the fact that we're actually having a race on a military base. Who the hell, 5 years ago, if someone told me that they were going to have a race on a military base as a street course, I would have thought you're the biggest idiot ever. Do you even watch NASCAR? Have you even seen a road course race before? These guys don't know how to drive those. And then they come out with the Gen 7 car. They, initially announced the Chicago Street Race. They have a test run, and with more road courses getting added on the schedule over the course of a couple of years, now we're going to San Diego on America's 250th birthday. So, I mean, I am going to be going to that race myself. I mean, it's a once in a lifetime opportunity, and I'm taking advantage of that 100%. So, it's going to be exciting, even though it is a 3.5 mile street course. Will be probably much more fun to watch on TV, but super excited to be there in person and actually be on the Coronado station.
Yeah, it'll be amazing. I mean, honestly, nothing cooler than racing on an actual military base with fighter jets and tanks and everything else that are just laying around. It'll make you feel like you're racing around in like you just got 4 stars in GTA kind of thing. It'll be really cool. I'm really looking forward to. I don't know if I'll be able to make it to that race necessarily. Um, but I mean, it could be really cool to watch on TV too. So I guess we'll have two different perspectives on that when that comes around, which will be pretty awesome. I mean, just some other schedule changes, a race that I'm excited for too this year is Chicagoland coming back. Being
Woo!
being a kid from Chicago, and used to go to like the NHRA drag races, that were right next door to the Chicagoland. They're in Joliet. I'm really excited to go to that race this year and see what it has to offer. I'm really excited about it because it's old pavement. Obviously, like these cars, it's almost built for this Gen 7 car, in my opinion. It's that old pavement. It's that like Kansas style cookie cutter track, which these cars have just for some reason raced really well on. Um, and I feel like it's going to produce a crazy finish. It'll be some good racing, and I'm really excited to see what happens with that race and what it could bring back to the sport after being gone since 2019.
Hmm.
So I mean, a couple other races that they're kind of moving around the schedule is obviously um, what is it? North Wilkesboro is now points paying, which will be cool with that not no longer being the All Star race. See some points paying out of that. I don't know what your opinion is on that. Moving from the All Star race to now being points paying, but
Yeah, no. So looking at the 2026 schedule, I mean, Chicagoland coming back, that's a huge bonus. I know a lot of fans are super grateful for that track to be back. I myself, I grew up in Chicago like Nate did and went to Chicagoland every year from 2011 to 2019. I mean, I flipped the bird when Kyle Busch, wrecked Larson going into three in 2018, one of the most iconic finishes. It was Dale Jr.'s first race he ever broadcasted. And then, of course, the 2019 race when Bowman and Larson were going at it the last couple of laps. That was something super huge to look forward to. And, with the races that we had at Kansas, at Charlotte, at Vegas, like I think we're going to see the same product at that track, and it's going to be something to look forward to on that 4th of July weekend for sure. But with the other changes to the schedule, I know that Charlotte Roval's gone now. With Charlotte having 2 oval races, that as a NASCAR fan, super happy about. Don't get me wrong, the Roval had some really cool races and good finishes, but with them having 2 ovals on the schedule, I think that that's something that was needed. I think having a road course race in the playoffs kind of, we were traditional turning left for 4 hours. Like we don't need to turn right in the playoffs. That's not how we award champions. We award champions based on Martinsville, on Las Vegas, on Kansas, on Homestead, Miami, like all of those racetracks where you're turning left the whole time. Like I feel like a race like Charlotte Roval or Watkins Glen in the playoffs, like I feel like that race is just irrelevant to the rest of the chase format. So I'm super grateful for that to have an oval track on the schedule. And down the road, I would really enjoy the Roval to come back, but potentially maybe they add a third date to the Charlotte racetrack where they have 2 oval races and a road course on the schedule, which I would really prefer because especially with them going from 6 road courses down to 4, they got rid of Mexico City, and then now the Roval's gone. This car was made for intermediates. It was made for road courses, so I could definitely see them down the road bringing the Roval back. But looking at other changes, I know North Wilkesboro being a points paying race, not really a fan of. Just with how the races have gone in the past, I felt like it was primarily a 1 lane track where it was basically impossible to pass, and it was just follow the leader the entire time. I know that they're gonna try to do their best with the tire package that Goodyear presents to make it an entertaining race, and I'm not opposed to having it as a points paying race, but it's gonna be it's going to be one of those weekends where it's going to be primarily a hit or a miss, and I'm hoping that it's not a miss because I could see them having North Wilkesboro on the schedule for a long time. But two things. two more things. I know I'm kind of going off a rant, yapping a whole paragraph and stuff, but Dover being the All Star race, I mean, what the hell are we doing, NASCAR? What the hell are we doing? Like, Dover, yes, it's an entertaining race. We used to have two races on the schedule. We'd have one in late spring, early summer, and then we have one in the playoffs. And now we don't even have a points paying race at Dover. And I know over in that northeast region in the states, you don't have many racetracks up there. You have upstate New York and Watkins Glen. You got Loudon, New Hampshire Motor Speedway. You got Dover, Delaware, and you got Pocono. That's pretty much all you got up there. And the fact that you're getting rid of, a popular race in a state in Delaware and moving it to an all-star race, don't get me wrong, it's probably going to sell out again, but I don't like that move by NASCAR. If they're going to make a track an all-star race, they're going to have to add another race on schedule to have a full points paying weekend. But yeah, that's something I'm pretty opposed to, but I could see it, kind of working out in the end, because I know they've been kind of testing the All-Star race over the course of a couple of years of Bristol, Texas, Daytona, all that stuff. So, definitely a new change, and we may see some positive outcomes out of that. But last thing I want to talk about for the schedule, I know I've been talking a lot, but Watkins Glen moving to Mother's Day weekend, that I was super pissed off about. And that's coming from someone that sells tickets. And the reason being is Watkins Glen is a family weekend. Like, they had the race at the beginning of August in upstate New York where they had the national park open. Kids weren't going to school yet. They still had a couple of weeks before their semesters kicked off. So people made it a family weekend. They had a ton of camping, a ton of, races that they had that weekend to go to. And now that it's in the beginning of May on Mother's Day weekend, I mean, it may snow that weekend. The weather might be really bad. I mean, the state park's not even going to be open, but I did hear that they are opening the state park that weekend for people attending that race. So good on NASCAR to get in contact with those people to open that up. But in terms of like moving that race to the Mother's Day weekend, I mean, they had it at the beginning of August, moved it a couple of weeks to the end of August where kids were starting school. Then they moved it to September. And a lot of fans that were going out to that event were getting more and more mad the fact that they were changing it weekend after week after week, year over the course of a couple of years. And now that they're moving it to May, a lot of those fans up there are upset. So hoping that this is kind of just a one-off kind of thing and they move Watkins Glen back to that date. But, we're not in charge of the schedule, so we'll just have to see how that plays. But I talked a lot right there between the Rowell, Dover, North Wilkesboro. So I'm going to hand it off to you, ask your takes on that, but just wanted to get my piece out there with all the different changes on the schedule.
Yeah, no, I think everything you said was right there. Hit the nail on the head with that. Just one little thing to add that I guess, like, if we're talking about things we don't necessarily love about the schedule changes this year, my biggest thing is the No More Throwback Weekend at Darlington. I don't necessarily love that. I get the fact that, certain sponsors are gonna wanna do their own thing. They're not like, it costs more money, to have to put out a different wrap job for the cars and, try to find a sponsor that's willing to go with, an old Dale Earnhardt scheme or an old Jeff Gordon scheme or, whoever it is. I think, honestly, for me, the nostalgia, I love nostalgia. I love the feeling. I love when a football team throws on their throwback uniforms. I love when, obviously those paint schemes that are never gonna leave the track are back in NASCAR and really shown and, celebrated during that race. And that's one thing I'm not necessarily looking forward to this year. Hopefully, praying that, some of those teams are gonna decide to, still throw on a couple throwback schemes here and there, just because, I mean, there's nothing preventing them from doing it, but it's just not as, encouraged or motivated, this year. So, hopefully, we still see some teams throwing it back, but,
Huh? I mean, if they want to throw it back, fine by
clip
me,
that
man. But
chat.
their race suit's not gonna be able to have much motion back there. But yeah, no. I mean, with the throwback weekend, I completely agree with you. I mean, it's 25 years since Dale Earnhardt's passing, and I know that with the Austin Dillon paint scheme they had at the Clash, they were honoring Dale Earnhardt's late scheme in the late 90s, early 2000s, which that was really cool to see. But it. I'm sure the teams will have kind of one-offs over the course of the 36 races where they'll have like a throwback scheme. I remember, Jeff Gordon's retirement year, he had a throwback to his Rainbow Warrior scheme from the 90s at a Bristol race. He had his own paint scheme for Homestead. Obviously that's a special circumstance because it was a retirement party, but, we could definitely see that going down the road. We could definitely see some teams kind of, going back to their roots and stuff like that. But I mean, that's what Darlington was known for. They had the throwback weekend, and then they had the crown jewel this excuse me, just had dinner of the Southern 500. And with that throwback race, I mean, I love seeing those paint schemes. I mean, they throw it back to the 80s. They talk about, maybe even like the 2010s, like Jimmy Johnson getting the 200 win for Hendrick, and Bowman ran that paint scheme during the throwback race last weekend. Like, that's something NASCAR fans really appreciate, is going back to their roots, and going back to what became of the sport, and how it got popular over time. So that's definitely something not to definitely something that NASCAR will have to kind of talk about for future plans, just because that throwback weekend was iconic and definitely brought a lot of traction in terms of of what NASCAR fans were going to what tracks each year, and that was one of the main reasons why people would go to that spring race. So we may see a drop in attendance for that race weekend, which is something not to look forward to, but yeah, I mean, looking into 2026 with all these schedule changes, just going to have to see how it goes. I mean, we can say good things, we can say bad things, but no matter what happens, it's permanently on the schedule for now. Like, we're just going to have to see how the weekend goes. And, we may even completely change our opinions after the race weekend. So, just have to see what that goes down the road. But one thing we're going to start capping off on the podcast today, but we're going to be talking a little bit about some drivers going into 2026, who's hot, who's cold, who's on the hot seat, all that stuff. So, for, the Daytona 500 coming up next weekend, who are we liking out of that, group of 44 drivers ish from that group?
Yeah, I mean, I could kind of kick it off, and you can give your reaction to it. I mean, I gave my top 10 picks for this Daytona race. Some guys that I'm really liking. I'm really liking Ryan Blaney. He's my number one pick going into the Daytona race. Obviously, he won the summer race at Daytona, which is part of the reason why I like him there. But I also like the Fords at those drafting tracks. It seems like they're always up there at the front of the pack. I feel like it's going to be a good chance for him to get a strong start. William Byron, obviously back-to-back defending champion of the Daytona 500, so got him in second place, looking to potentially three-peat here. My third is Chase Briscoe, another guy who's really finished the end of the season last year very strong, and I'm hoping that he's able to kind of kick off this year with the same kind of mantra. A little bit of a hot take, but Daniel Suarez, I feel like he does really well. He's always finding a chance to like get there to the front of the pack on these drafting tracks. I mean, we saw him win at Atlanta a couple years ago, and I mean, last year he was finishing in the finishes at Daytona too. So I kind of like Daniel Suarez to actually have a chance to do something here at this drafting track. It seems like those are his strongest races are the drafting tracks. My fifth pick is Joey Logano, another Ford guy, another Penske guy. Don't love Joey Logano, but I do think he does well at these kinds of tracks. Then I've also got Christopher Bell. Christopher Bell is another one of those guys who seems to find his way up to the front of the pack. Chris Buescher is another one, similar thing, finds his way up to the front of the pack on these drafting tracks. And then a couple hot takes to kind of round us out here. Ryan Preece, I really liked his speed at Bowman Gray. Not necessarily that's going to translate to the Daytona race, but he's also driving a Ford. Really think that could help him just propel himself to the front. Justin Allgaier, who is racing that 40 car for Junior Motorsports, finished in the top 10 last year. So I don't know. I kind of like him. Obviously, he's very successful in Xfinity, but I got him finishing in the top 10, and then rounding out the top 10, I got Kyle Larson. Obviously has struggled on these types of tracks, so that's kind of why I've got him towards the bottom of the list. But I'd love to see him potentially get his first drafting track win here at Daytona. So
Wow.
I know those are some hot takes, but if you have your reaction, go ahead.
Some of those, some of those are kind of like rhetorical, like Logano, Blaney, Larson. We expect those guys to run top 10 week in, week out. Ryan Preece, as long as he isn't departing from Daytona International Airport, I think that he'll have a contention to win, as long as he keeps his four wheels on the ground. He won the Clash. Had that was great. I think that Ryan Preece has been super down to earth guy. So I'm definitely looking forward to seeing what RFK is going to be doing that weekend, especially with Buescher and Keselowski having success in the past at these restrictor plate events. So definitely something to look forward to there. But Justin Allgaier, I mean, he did get top 10 last year. With that being a one-off team, I think that they're going to make a lot of mistakes. I don't think that they're going to be in contention down the road. They're too inexperienced, in my opinion, to kind of really have a contention to win. And I know with like Jimmy Johnson getting top five last year, he did not only run Daytona, he ran a couple more races. So this is kind of like a team that only does one event a year. And it's gonna be surprising to see if they're able to do anything better than the top 15. But in terms of Kyle Larson, I mean, he won a stage at Daytona. He was in contention to win the spring race at Atlanta. I mean, we talk about how his bad luck is at these restrictor plate tracks, and 75% of the time it's not his doing, it's someone else being an idiot on the track. So, if Larson gets a win at one of these races, it's going to completely turn his luck around. Like, I feel like Larson every year is in contention for these races, but he either gets wrecked out or it's something to do with him running out of gas. We saw that with Talladega last year. So I just, I'm rooting for him. He's my favorite driver, and he's had the shittiest luck at these tracks, and I'm hoping that down the road we're able to see a win out of him there. But my hot what the hell is it called? Hot
Hot take.
topic, hot take, yeah, hot topic. What the fuck? Hot pocket? All right, whatever.
Going to the mall.
Yeah, exactly. But my hot take is gonna be Kyle Busch. That's who my winner is. He's gonna be my dark horse, and I think that um, you know that team needs momentum, man. I feel like, he's just, we're so used to seeing Kyle Busch running up front, leading laps, running top 5, top 10, and we haven't seen that out of the last 2 years out of him, and it's been really sad to see because of how dominant he was. I mean, everyone hated Jimmy Johnson, everyone hated Kyle Busch in the 2010s. Now everyone hates Joey Logano and Ryan Blaney and Kyle Larson, Chase Elliott, all in this generation. So, Kyle Busch still has some fight in him. I know that, when he was racing at JGR, it was more of him like, his expectation was to win week in, week out. And now when he's over at RCR with, not as great as equipment as Hendrick is, they're expected, maybe a top 15 every now and then, top 20 consistently. That's something Kyle Busch wasn't necessarily known for. He was known that, like, if he didn't win a race, he was pissed off. And now that, he's had a couple of kids, it's been more in the family life. I think he's calmed down a little bit over time and gotten more mature, professional. So, I think Kyle Busch is going to have a real good shot this year at taking the 500 because, it'll be good to see with the chase format coming back, how Kyle Busch is kind of going to, have over the course of the year, because he was in contention for a long time. And then, towards the end before the Daytona final race, he got wrecked out of that one, but he was still in contention to make it on points if we were doing that chase format. So definitely something to look forward to there. And then my other hot take is going to be Josh Berry. So Josh Berry, in the Daytona Summer Race in 24, when he was driving for Stuart Haas, he was in front before he got wrecked. And he has some of the best restrictor plate drivers on his team. He has Austin Cindric, who's won a Daytona 500. He's won a Talladega race. You have Joey Logano, who's won multiple, restrictor plate events. You have Ryan Blaney, who's been the most successful at restrictor plate events in the next gen cars. So I think as long as he's working with them at the track, as long as they stay close to each other, manufacturer to manufacturer kind of thing, I think Josh Berry will have a real good shot at winning it. And we saw that with Harrison Burton in 24 when he won the summer race. Obviously, he didn't have any teammates around him, but if he stays in contention, he could definitely steal that win from people running up front.
Yeah, for sure. I like those picks a lot. If we're talking about more picks, I'm gonna go into my fantasy picks for this upcoming week, or yeah, for next Sunday. Looks like Tuesday is the day that it opens up for us to start picking our fantasy team for each week. So this first week, I'm gonna go with Ryan Blaney starting it off. And I'm gonna throw in William Byron. Get Denny Hamlin in there too. As a potential, obviously he's had some success at Daytona over the years, and just depends on obviously the course of what happens. Daytona is one of those races where you're kind of at the luck of the gods at the end of the day. I think Joey Logano is another guy I've got up there. Again, my hot take, Daniel Suarez. I've got him on my top 5. And then in my garage, I'm gonna throw Kyle Larson in there. Hopefully, if he's able to if he's able to make it into that end of the race, that'll throw him in. But I just, with his luck at these races, I know he's able to run on the top, but just with his luck at these drafting tracks, it just seems like he always gets the short end of the stick. So just, I've got him in the garage, but I'm gonna wait to use him and deploy him like my last Pokemon.
don't even want to do this podcast anymore. But yeah, no, my fantasy picks, I'm gonna throw Ty Gibbs, or no, actually, you know what? I'm gonna throw Bubba Wallace in the garage. I think that he's definitely one that makes a lot of aggressive moves at Daytona specifically. I mean, he caused that big one in the summer race back in August, so I definitely have him in my garage. I don't think he's gonna finish the race because he hasn't in the last couple of years, but you know. We'll see down the road, but my 5 starters, putting Blaney in there, I'm putting Larson in there, I'm putting Logano in there, I'm putting Hamlin in there, and then my 5th pick, like I mentioned before, I'm going to be adding Josh Berry.
Nice. I like those picks. So we're gonna do our pick'em challenge now. So our number one driver, if you're gonna pick one driver to finish at the top, who are you picking for this upcoming race? And then we're gonna do a challenge throughout the course of the season, just so the viewers know. Sorry, I just smacked my mic. We're gonna do a challenge throughout the course of the season. Whoever's driver from this driver pick'em challenge is gonna get a point. Go ahead.
I'm just saying, whoever finishes better, we get a point over the
Yeah,
course of the 36 races.
over the course of the 36 races. So there's 36 points available. Whoever's driver finishes better gets the point for that week. And so going off, I'll let you go first, just who your driver pick'em is.
Yeah, and one thing that we're doing with this pick'em as well is we're not able to use any of our fantasy drivers in this list. So with the 5 picks that we're going to make, I can't pick Larson, Logano, Blaney, or Blaney, Hamlin, or Berry. So my pick is going to be Chase Briscoe.
Okay.
And the only reason I say that is just because Chase Briscoe won at the most recent restrictor plate event. You know, he's a guy that is content with running top 20 during the entire race, then making the moves necessary to get the win. We saw that at Talladega when he was just riding around behind his teammates Bell and Gibbs and Hamlin, and then finally made the move on the outside and passed everyone on the final lap. So I have Chase Briscoe being my pick'em for the 26 Daytona 500, and I think he'll have a good finish.
Yeah. So my pick for this week will be it's gonna be Chris Buescher. I feel like he's one of those guys that just finds himself at the front of these Daytona, or like not just Daytona, but the drafting track races. Um, from what I've seen recently, he's always he's consistent with finishing in those top 10 to top 15s of the race. So he's gonna be my pick for this week. So we got a pretty good matchup there. I feel like with Chase Briscoe and Chris Buescher.
Yeah, got them damn Yoders ahead of them blue ovals. You know what I'm saying, man?
Yeah. And then so the next thing we'll do is our 5 drivers to watch in 2026, just for the whole season.
And then we'll wrap up.
Yeah, we can wrap things up. I was gonna throw Chase favorites in there as well. We could just do our.
We can do that down the road and towards like the summertime before like that stretch happens. I know we'll have 2 off seasons coming up on the schedule, so we can just bring it up there in that time.
Okay, cool. So my 5 drivers to watch this year in 2026, not necessarily. These aren't just so everybody knows, these aren't necessarily favorites to win the whole thing or whatever, but just 5 drivers to watch their improvements throughout 2026 and maybe to win a race or maybe their first race. So my first driver to watch in 2026 is going to be Carson Hocevar. I really think that he's going to do some good stuff this year. I really think he showed flashes of speed last year in a couple different racetracks throughout the schedule. And I think he just got unlucky and a little bit too eager to try to finish up top too early in the race, and he just put himself in a bad situation towards the end. I think maturity is going to be the big thing for him this year. I think we'll really see him mature and potentially win a race this year. My next driver to watch is going to be SVG, just on the ovals. I mean, I really think he's going to have a good opportunity. We saw him get a top 10 at Kansas last year during the playoffs, which was really cool to see him actually succeed on an oval, where there wasn't anything too crazy that happened in that race where there's a bunch of cars wrecking out or anything like that. So it was a fair top 10 finish for SVG at an oval, and I really think he's going to start to hit the ground running with some of those ovals this year. Obviously, Ryan Preece, who was the winner of the Clash, I think he's going to do well this year. Connor Zilic is another one. Obviously, ton of success in the now O'Reilly Auto Parts series last year. I think it's going to translate over to the Cup Series. I think he's going to get off to a little bit of a slow start at the beginning, but I think towards the middle of the season, he's really going to hit the ground running and start to move up the leaderboards for some people. And then my last driver to watch is going to be Daniel Suarez this year, obviously in a new seat over at Spire. I think he's going to have a chance to really show some success over there. And he's going to have a chip on his shoulder this year with him having to switch teams, going over to Spire, being working with Carson Hocevar. I think he's going to have some really good shots to really prove himself this year. So those are my 5 drivers to watch.
Can you repeat them?
Yeah, so I got
I'm
Carson
sorry.
Carson Hocevar at 1, SVG at 2, Ryan Preece at 3, Zilich at 4, and Suarez at 5, in no particular
Okay.
order.
All right, yeah, because I just didn't want to make sure I overlapped with any of your drivers. But number one, I'll start off with Ty Gibbs. He's going to be my one to watch. I think that he needs to have a step up in his career in order to make it in the Cup Series for a long time. I know he's still pretty young, but with him being on a powerhouse Toyota team and, he's, with his teammates all being in contention for the championship for last year, I think with Ty Gibbs missing out on the playoffs, he's going to have to make a giant leap this year in order to, don't get me wrong, Joe Gibbs is granddaddy. I mean, he's probably just keep that silver spoon ride for the next 5-10 years at least. But for right now, I think Ty Gibbs needs to get a win this year if he wants to keep that ride for a long term. So definitely curious to see what tracks he'll excel at and what his track will be to kind of win it that weekend. But I guess my second one to watch for is Austin Dillon. And it could be a hot take, but Austin Dillon has been dominant at Richmond. With the win and you're in format, that's all Austin Dillon needed to do. So they probably spent a lot of their time in investments going into that Richmond weekend, but now that they don't have that opportunity anymore, I think that Austin Dillon is going to have to do better at other tracks besides Richmond, because we saw him consistently in like top 30, top 25 positions. That's not something good, especially with a team that was arguably the third best Chevy team at a time in the Cup Series. So we'll have to see what Austin Dillon is. And then going into that point, his teammate, Kyle Busch, Kyle Busch is going into his 3rd year in a row without a win. And that's ridiculous. I mean, this guy has 200 wins over all 3 series. Like, we're used to this guy winning. Like, the fact that it's taken more than 72 races for him to get a win is ridiculous. And I think that Richard Childress may need to figure out some changes in car chiefs, technicians, engineering, because we're used to seeing Kyle Busch run up front. The fact that he hasn't gotten a win in 2 years says a lot about that organization. So, but yeah, those are the 3. My 4th one's going to be Alex Bowman. And the reason why I'm saying Alex Bowman is because he clearly, like Ty Gibbs, lacked in the powerhouse department. Like, he had Chase Elliott, Kyle Larson, William Byron. Obviously, Byron and Larson both being championship 4 contenders, and Chase Elliott being a top 8 contender. Bowman didn't even make it past the round of 16. And with him coming up on a contract year, of course, Ally does love him, and he's a great, brings in a lot of money for that team. I think that Bowman is going to have at least multiple wins, or at least consistently run up front for him to not be in the hot seat in that organization, because we could see other guys take that position down the road. But I know with Hocevar, announcing that long-term contract with Spire, I know a lot of rumors are going around that Hocevar would take over the 48. I think Alex Bowman right now still has a secure spot, but we may see different changes moving forward, especially with the Ally contract ending over the course of 2027 and 28. So that'll be something to look forward to there as well. And then my last one's going to be Chase Elliott. And don't get me wrong, Chase Elliott was the most consistent driver last year, had the best average finish, but he wasn't running up front. He wasn't leading laps. Like, there was something going on between him and Gustafson and that team. Like, I feel like, Chase Elliott had 2 Mickey Mouse wins, and that's a hot take. I know Atlanta, he was pretty good at running up front and getting passes done and getting that magic done. But for Kansas, like, when that win came out of nowhere, he went from 10th to 1st in an overtime restart and stole the win from all those Toyotas hitting each other on the final lap. So, Chase Elliott, we're used to seeing that guy, lead laps, run up front, and the fact that he was running top 20 every year or every race, that was shocking. And I know that if he wants to take it to the next step and actually have contention for the championship for the Chase, and consistency is obviously going to be rewarded, but he has to run better than what he's doing right now, because top 15s ain't going to cut it. So definitely looking at those drivers moving forward for 2026. Those will be my guys to watch.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think that about does it for our first podcast, our first episode of the Checkered Flag podcast with Drew and Nate. So I just want to say to everybody, I appreciate you guys for watching. I appreciate you guys for taking the time to listen to us today. If you can, just help us out. We're just trying to get growing here. We're trying to keep it moving. We're trying to,
We're growers, not showers.
yeah, but yeah, if you guys can, just whatever platform this might be on, if it's on Instagram, TikTok, throw a like, throw a comment, maybe something that might help us out to maybe be a little bit better moving forward these next few episodes that we might be doing. or that we will be doing throughout the course of this season. If you can, if you're on YouTube, throw a subscribe, throw a like, throw a comment. Let us know if there's anything you guys might want to be looking for. If there's anything you guys might want us to talk about, let us
Drop your
know.
takes. Drop your takes in the comment section below. We'd love it. We'd love to hear your
And
feedback.
roast our takes. It's okay. We can be
Yeah.
roasted.
No, it's okay.
Uh,
I talk to people on the phone all the time. They constantly tell me I'm wrong no matter what I tell them about NASCAR. So, you're not going to break me. I'm used to this stuff already. So if you guys feel like I'm talking out of my ass, I pretty much am half the time, but the other half I'm actually knowing what I'm talking about. So,
yeah.
but
No, go ahead.
sorry, no, but just wrapping up. Appreciate everyone watching and tuning in. We'll be releasing these podcasts every Monday after the race weekend, so we'll follow up on Monday after the 500 to talk a little bit about that weekend. So we'll see you guys in the next episode. Thanks so much for tuning in to the Checkered Flag. We'll see you next time, guys.